Meanwhile, the British carmaker Aston Martin issued another profit warning, blaming US tariffs for further losses and declining sales. The company says it expects its full-year sales to fall by a mid to high single digit and its annual losses to exceed $148 million. Aston Martin's shares are now down around 10%. Let's talk about all of this now with Peter Wells, who's Director of the Centre for Automotive Research, Automotive Industry Research at Cardiff University. Peter, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So let's just talk about BYD first. Despite being excluded, as I said, from this $870 million EV subsidy scheme in Britain, BYD managing to outpace nearly all its competitors except Tesla. How's it managing to do that?
Well, it's a truly impressive performance. Let's be clear about that. I think there's a combination of things here. I mean, BYD has actually been quite carefully laying the groundwork, so that's important. They've built a good dealer network, good coverage across the country, and of course they've got some really competitive products that are appealing to an audience here in the UK and I think more widely, not just in terms of styling but also in terms of performance and price. So it's a pretty compelling package that BYD have got on the market at the moment.
Well, indeed, some UK executives have said that Chinese vehicles could take over the market, calling these vehicles cheap and impressive, as you're saying, these appealing products. I mean, is that a good thing for consumers, do you think? They are clearly very popular.
Well, I think also bear in mind that UK in particular has always had some space, shall we say, in the market for a range of different competitive products. They're not so nationalistic in their purchasing habits, and neither are they so confined in terms of, you know, what kind of choices of vehicle they're going to go for. So I think it's a good market for BYD to open up in, and perhaps then it will provide a springboard for others. I think you have to bear in mind that British consumers perhaps are more generous in terms of the way they look at the available options on the market, and more prepared to go with a newcomer, to go with something a bit different, and to maybe be more sympathetic to the offer that's available.
So to expand on your point about it being a springboard, I mean, could BYD's growing presence affect the UK's long-term goal to build an EV supply chain network? And could there be some sort of convergence? Could it be good for the domestic British EV market?
Well, it's not just in Britain, but across Europe now. There's a considerable tension between those legacy businesses, long-established companies and long-established brands who are perhaps struggling a bit now to make this transition to electric. I think BYD has shown that it can be done, and you have to have the will and the capability to execute. To some extent, some of these problems for domestic companies here in the UK have not been entirely of their own making. You know, JLR, for example, has had that well-publicised issue with it being hacked in the end of September, and that's significantly disrupted the delivery of vehicles over the short term. But the long-term structural problems remain, I believe.
Well, let's switch to talking about Aston Martin then, just discussing some more troubled areas. They're issuing another profit warning. They're blaming Donald Trump's US tariffs. Is it really the severe financial impact of these trade measures that's causing all of this trouble?
It certainly is part of the case that Donald Trump's tariffs have impacted not just Aston Martin, but other kind of high market specialist producers. Porsche, for example, has struggled as well. And that shows you something about the reliance on the US market to support production in these kind of manufacturers, and the inability perhaps to spread their market success into other locations. Of course, Aston Martin does sell elsewhere, but the US has been a core market for a very long time. Perhaps it speaks to the need to restructure their entire manufacturing operations. Now, maybe they need to downscale their ambition, because there is no way that Aston Martin can realistically put manufacturing presence into North America.
And just to talk a little bit more about the broader industry issues, how much of Aston Martin's current difficulties are really about those? You mentioned the cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover, also supply chain disruptions. Are they, though, more company-specific, a lot of these challenges?
Well, I think a lot depends on brand, on heritage, on where they're positioned in the market, and then how far they can move with that into this new era. Some companies seem to be executing better. One could look at BMW as a good example. They seem to be able to manage this transition reasonably well. Many other companies have struggled, either in terms of strategy or in terms of execution, the ability to make this happen. However, I think all companies, no matter where they are, including, I would say, BYD, have to be so careful with this issue of having their computer systems hacked, because everything depends on those. The manufacturing systems, the supply chains, the distribution networks, the marketing, the finance, all of these things are tied together. And if that system is entered into with a bad actor, then they are in really bad trouble. So I think this is a warning shot across the bows of the entire industry.
Indeed. Well, fascinating stuff. Really great to get your thoughts, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Wells, Director of the Centre for Automotive Industry Research at the University of Cardiff.